Gentleman from Arkansas, Mr. Hill, the Vice Chair of the committee, is now recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Chairman. Director, good to have you back. I wanted to pick up on a couple of topics that we started on in June and follow up on 1033, continue that conversation. And of course, that rule is rooted in the statute of Dodd-Frank, and I grant that. But we've had 13 years to think about what the right direction is and get it, and I want to see that we get it right the first time. And so we've had a couple of good discussions about that, but I want to continue that. When you testified in June, I asked you about the scope being considered for this proposal, which hasn't changed from SOBREFRA, Reg E, Reg Z are the topic, and your focus on transaction data. But the proposal goes on, as it's now been released, and says supplemental rulemaking might come out for other covered persons and consumer financial products or services. So we've had 13 years. And the agency's covered this and talked about it, and Congress has for 13 years. So why leave that open-ended, perpetual rulemaking potential? What other covered persons and products or services besides EBT did the CFPB consider but ultimately decide against including in the proposal?
Yeah, so, I like to follow in some ways a 80-20 rule, which is what can we get the most benefit for, and really start seeing it to get moving. And what we found was that transaction data of your bank account, credit card that was really going to power much of open banking in the US. And even, let's say, your auto loan or mortgage loan payment, that's often typically still reflected in your transaction account. So when it comes to mortgage, auto, other places, that's a lot of other financial institutions. And so we wanted to make sure we studied that a little bit more and to see how much additional data it would actually provide. So I appreciate what you're saying.
Yeah. Well, the second issue I raised in June and you did not have an answer to, and now we have a proposal, which is data breach liability. So where have you come ashore on who bears the liability for a data breach?
So generally speaking, when a consumer permissions their data, they're handing over their data to that new financial institution. We got some feedback that they wanted the rule to have some specific regulatory text on liability generally. I think one challenge is that we can't necessarily provide liability protection for every single law that exists. We're trying to figure out under which of our statutes can we make sure it's absolutely clear that it's the receiving institution that really bears, is responsible for handling that data. And in the data handling section of the rule, we do specify the requirements that the receiving firm would have. So I don't know if we got it perfectly right. We definitely want to hear feedback on this.
We'll look at that and we may be in follow-up on that. Let me switch gears. In the last few days, you've issued a new rule, large participants proposal by the agency, and it has new supervisory oversight over non-banks offering digital payments and wallets. It's a pretty major step since you're really an enforcement agency, not a supervisory agency, I would say principally. The proposal threshold for this supervisory oversight is based on the annual volume of consumer payment transactions. So I'm not going to debate that, whether it's $1 million or $5 million. I'm more curious about some clarity about who's covered. So I assume that 6 companies named in October orders are included: Amazon, Apple, Google, Meta, PayPal, and Square. Is that right?
So again, that's currently a proposal, and let me just share, Congressman Hill, we devote way more resources to supervision, and the rule we've proposed—
Well, you can write me the answer to that. You can comment on that, but let's talk about this question.
No, I'm trying to get to you.
Yeah, but I want to get to it.
So the top firms, what we have proposed is a threshold for which, if they're above that, they would be subject to supervision.
Well, who's left besides the ones that were named in October? Are big retailers covered on
So again, it's not a matter of public record always how many transactions or customers they have. So what we're trying to do is get comment on the threshold, and then we would then be able to determine who's above that. But if I were to speculate, and I'm just speculating, the most popular non-bank payment apps would be covered.
Okay, well, I look forward to following up with you on this,
course.
Mr. Chairman. I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. The gentlewoman from